with AI technology expanding, with automation becoming more a part of our lives, that we're letting AI do creative work while more and more humans have to do shitty app-based, gig-based delivery and driving work. It's just crazy. Who would have thought, 100 years ago that if we had that level of technology, what we were going to do with it is make the humans the machines and let the machines do creative labor. That's fun. So we'll talk about this more later. Maybe I just had that thought on the way here. Another thing before we get into it. On the way here on the highway today in Los Angeles, a car in front of me had a flat tire. And then I figured, oh, they have a flat tire. They're going to pull over. But then they kept driving and I smelled the rubber and I backed up because it seemed quite dangerous. And they let the tire fully wear down. They're going 70 miles per hour, started driving on the rim. I got off on an exit, but who knows what happened. So that's just the sort of stuff you see on a beautiful rainy day in Los Angeles, California. Guys, I'm very excited about today's show. One of my favorite YouTube creators. I hate the word YouTuber. I know it's the word. I know it's the preferred nomenclature. But Jared Henderson is going to be joining us in just a few minutes.
Essayist?
Video essayist, digital intellectual. I don't know. Coffee is necessary now said Hassan Piker stole your videos. No, Hassan was just reacting to stuff. And I think at the end of the day, even if we don't get the clicks when Hassan watches our videos, that's still good for us.
I mean, the numbers on that video, regardless.
Yeah. It's Penny Waldrop's 50th birthday. Penny, happy birthday. Everyone say happy birthday to Penny. And I would say because Penny's 50 and has the wisdom of the ages, please do ask questions. So right now, especially as the show's getting going, people are filing in. Please do ask Penny for any questions. Ask Penny for advice because at the age of 50, they are full of wisdom. So ask questions. Wait, Henry, I don't want you to dox yourself. This isn't doxing. I'm incorrectly using the word. How many years until you're 50?
16?
Wow. Full of youth and pluck, guys.
Damn,
Producer
that
Henry
is closer than I realized.
Is full of pluck. Let's see. I want to thank everyone.
Why did you ask me?
I know. I got some great emails. In the last few days after what we talked about on Monday. Guys, I'll say it. Some of the stuff I talked about on Monday, I probably wasn't supposed to. I get a little overshare-ish sometimes, and I guess I'm doing that. I'll say this very quickly. If you are a Wisecrack patron and you saw a post yesterday and then it got taken down, I'll just say I was maybe a little impulsive, a little overshare-y. We are going to make a more formal announcement about some of the stuff soon, but one of my colleagues hit me up to be like, hey dog, maybe slow your roll a little bit, but there you go. Again, like the stream if you're here. We're gonna have a great show today. We have another video coming out on Friday. Friday's video is about generational warfare. Basically the idea that we have trained ourselves to hate other generations, or there's these sort of arbitrary conflicts between Gen Z and X and Y and Alpha and Boomers or whatever. But really, it's just a bunch of manufactured crap from the marketing industry to both sell stuff to us while sort of fomenting or sort of fostering consumer identity via that conflict. Fun stuff. So that's coming out. Thanks again to everyone who watched the video that came out last week. This is, ironically, with everything happening at the channel, the last 10 days has been like the most views we've gotten in forever. We're off to a really hot start this year, and it's because of you all. So thank you so much again for that. Well, let's get into it. If Jared is ready, let's bring Jared Henderson onto the show.
Okay.
Jared.
What? Hello.
Hey, first of all, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's something fun about being a part of an industry, a generation, a type of person where I regularly meet people who I like very much for the first time in a digital setting with a few hundred people hanging out and casually watching. Totally normal stuff.
Absolutely. It was like I kind of knew that you knew me because you tagged me on Twitter,
Hmm.
and it's like, yeah, that's a totally normal way to just like hit somebody up.
What else are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Well, let me say I'll suck up, and then I'm gonna be really mean to you for the next hour, Jared. But really excited to talk to you because you're someone, and I know a lot of our audience watches your videos, but it's maybe like within the past 4 to 6 months, YouTube started serving me your videos, and it was one of those things where it made me doubt how good the algorithm is because
Oh.
I should be in the target audience for much of what you do. So it's been really exciting. And when I realized after watching some of your videos and Googling you that you're also a person that did a philosophy PhD and has found yourself making YouTube videos. That's cool. I know there's
Yeah.
a few of us out there.
We're like a very particular weird and I don't know if honorable is the right word for the class of people that we
Yeah,
are, but
definitely
we've
not
sort of
dishonorable.
no. I'm really happy with how my career ended up in that sense. Like I like doing content online and
Right.
I hate the word content, but
No,
I
it sucks.
and I heard you talking about YouTuber briefly at the beginning. But I'm happy about it because I get to talk about these ideas with lots of people.
Yeah.
It also is in a weird situation where I talk about these ideas with lots of people and they can't really talk back except in
Mhm.
comments and things, and like that's a little isolating and strange, but it is something that I enjoy doing. And I slaved away on academic papers that got 100 readers. And
Yeah.
this feels a little bit different than that.
I'll say this and then I want to back up. No, I remember the first YouTube video I wrote as like a freelance writer, and it's when I was still in academia. And after a few weeks, it had like a couple 100,000 views. And I had that thought that was like, not only did I get paid a little bit of money to do this, which you don't get paid when you write, academic papers that you submit to journals.
Mhm.
Hundreds of thousands of people have seen this thing where there's papers that I've spent a year or two on, got 3 rounds of revisions,
Mhm.
had to maybe submit to multiple journals to get it published. And then in your heart of hearts that maybe 60 mostly grad students downloaded your paper and maybe a few of them read it.
Exactly. One of my papers got like a lot of downloads that I saw,
Oh,
and then
nice.
I found out my advisor had assigned it in a class that he taught, and I
That's
think
cool
that was
though.
like 50% of the readers.
Well, so I want to talk about some of your recent videos and things you're working on, but I want to, for my sake, and I think other people will be interested in this as well. I mean, give us the rundown a little bit of how you went from philosophy graduate student to, quite successful and impressive YouTube video essayist. What was your path to get there? And I asked that too
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I haven't asked that question before, and it's not like there's a direct path, so everyone's journey is kind of
yeah,
different. I'm
yeah.
just curious to hear how you ended up here.
Well, so as I was finishing my PhD, I looked at the job market and I saw that it did not exist, right? And there were like some guys that were a year or two ahead of me in my program who just had really similar profiles to me in the sense of like similar research, similar output, and they would get a single interview for a postdoc and then not get the postdoc, right? So I thought I got to find something else to do. And I went into tech first. So I actually had a tech job right after. In fact, by the time I got my PhD, I already had the job. I was moving to Austin a month later.
Cool. Well, so how did that happen? How do you and then remind me? I only know this from like watching your stuff. What was your specialization in grad school? Was it logic
It
or
was
philosophy?
logic and language. It was like
Okay, yeah.
logic and language. My dissertation was on theories of truth and like the
Hmm.
philosophy of language and logic of that stuff.
Yes.
And
How does that get you a tech job?
well, there is this weird tech company that I don't think is going to exist anymore soon, or is barely holding on. That was called Psycore. This is probably known
Mhm.
best because I think there's an X-Files reference to this because it's like a very old like research project.
Yeah.
It's one of the world's longest running AI projects. It
Oh.
is not one of the world's most successful AI projects, but it was one of and the idea was it was going to be AI that had common sense. This was this idea from the 80s. And they thought the best way to do this was to hire a bunch of philosophy PhDs to like encode all of human common sense into this AI. And I was just like one of the many people who tried to do that. And that didn't last very long for me. I then went on to a few other tech companies. It just like, once you're in, you just kind of lie your way into better and better paying jobs. And then I started, well, I hated it. I should say this. I hated working in tech. I thought it was like horrific. It was definitely not for me. And I wanted to find some way to talk about stuff that I cared about with people. And I was just like reading a lot of books. I wasn't really doing much philosophy anymore. And I just started kind of making videos because of that. And then I had some early videos kind of take off. Like they did okay. First video got,
What year did you start?
I've been doing this for, I think, about 2 to 2.5 years.
Okay, cool. Sorry, and I interrupted. You said your first video took off.
Yeah, it did okay, right? Yeah. I think it got 10,000 views in like a month, and I just posted it, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I could just keep going.
Yeah.
So I just kept trying, and the content's evolved a lot over time. Where originally it was like I would only talk about books and stuff there, and then I have been doing more explicitly like trying to bring philosophy back into it, and that's where I think it's really kind of taken off lately. And I'm having a lot more fun that way too. But I'm not doing logic. I'm not doing language. I'm mostly interested in these kind of big picture philosophical questions about what it means to be like a human being in this economic system and this technological environment. And those are the topics that I've been drawn to a lot lately.
Yeah. And you mentioned before that you don't really regret or sort of feel maybe I'll ask this more explicitly. So in doing what you're doing now, then do you feel any sort of longing for the formality of the academic lifestyle, or are you feeling good with where you're at?
So I am happy, but I think every ex-academic grieves like a little bit. Even the ones who are like the most jaded, that like you miss parts of it. I miss the cycle of the academic year quite a bit. I miss library access.
Yeah.
I miss institutional library access because it's so expensive or you have to find workarounds to read basic papers. I miss having sort of formalized areas for discussion with people. Of where they would be relatively like-minded. So I miss a lot of those things. That said, I think that the problem is I'm comparing the ideal of academia to where I am now. And then I have to think about like where would I actually have been? And odds are I would have been an underpaid adjunct, as most people are, who will possibly die in poverty, move around every couple of years. I mean, you hear these stories of lifelong adjuncts who are unable to pay for their own funerals, like when they die. And they've been teaching 4 classes a semester for 20 years or whatever, and they can't ever move out of anything. It's like pure instability. And I just think it's kind of unfair to myself to try to put myself through that, or anybody. I mean, it's a terrible system. So, and I wanted to opt out.
Yeah. And for folks watching who maybe have less experience in like the academic world, a thing that I feel like you're pointing to is there's this huge gap between the ideal of the academic life. And of course, the ideal is you're on a nice leafy campus with brick buildings. You spend part of your time teaching students things you care about. The other part of your time, you're interacting with your colleagues who are smart and interesting people. And you have, various chunks of time off to do reading and research and pursue ideas that you care about, all while making a decent salary and having benefits or whatnot. Whereas, like you said, the reality for many people is that adjunct lifestyle. For folks that don't know, a lot of people who teach college classes, increasingly a majority of people who teach them, are doing it on a per course basis. And I adjuncted on and off for like 4 or 5 years. And at least back in my day, the least I think I ever got paid was $1,800 for a course, which for folks, putting that together, that's like 16 weeks of teaching 3 hours and doing prep and grading and everything. Once you take taxes away, it's insane. Like my friends that were bartenders would make more than that in like a good week sometimes. Most I ever made was like $5,000 a course. But, you get no job stability. Often you don't have office space. At the end of every term, you're kind of waiting in fear and trembling to see if you have courses again. The reality of it is kind of a bummer. And, at least in my experience, after years and years of applying, when I did finally get a job, it was at a university that, to border on cliche, was being incredibly neoliberalized. Like I had a meeting early on where we were told that our class on Kant's Second Critique needed to include a section on resumes and CVs for students so that we could show a relationship between learning Kant and getting them jobs, which feels insane.
No, it happens all the time. And I don't. Did you ever experience when you adjuncted that the full-time faculty want to treat you like you're like a leper? Like if they get too close to you, like it's gonna like rub off. Like your contingent status is going to rub off on them or something.
Yes.
So you can't even use the printer in some departments.
Oh,
like that's
yeah.
how poorly they will treat their adjuncts.
100%. I would say most places I taught, I almost felt like the faculty took me less seriously than the students.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll shout this one out by name though. A place I taught where I actually then got a visiting job, but I taught at a place called Loyola University, Maryland in Baltimore, and went into it expecting to be treated like ass by the faculty. And everyone was so cool. Within weeks, I was invited to like a faculty reading group. The chair of the department was like super cool and would like, he like introduced me to people, scholars in my field I wanted to meet that he was close with. Like, there are good people out there, but but it's weird institutionally, especially in I come from more of like a continental philosophy background. So lots of like existentialism people and Marxism people and people whose work is all about, egalitarianism and justice, who within their own field do not practice that or seem afraid to embody any of the principles that you find in their work.
Oh no, academia is one of the most self-consciously progressive parts of the like culture that in turn that like they think of itself this way, but when it comes to any kind of sense of solidarity with workers or anything like that, it's like impossible to find. I mean, it's really hard to see people who I think actually kind of live up to the ideals they espouse in their books and papers. Not universally. I mean, I know people who do well, but it happens. But I also think though, you said the neoliberalization of the university has been a huge part of it. Just every institution is being hollowed out from the inside. Students are customers. Professors and instructors are now providing a service, and that service is job training.
Yeah, I mean, an example there, it's like the last place that I taught full time. One of the ways we got evaluated by the university, which then affected like staff funding, was how many of our students were in full-time employment within 6 months of graduating. And full-time employment, and this was in the UK, things like a full-time job at a coffee shop or a pub didn't count. But for our students, and kind of the way it works in the UK is most students, if you finish your undergrad, you don't go right into a master's or graduate program. You like take a year off and apply and get funding together. So we had all these students who had done so well that they were in a good position to apply to graduate programs, but took a year or a semester off to work in a cafe, read books, and apply. And that was counted as a mark against us as a department.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have jobs at like travel agencies.
Do you remember? Maybe you saw this. Occasionally, departments would decide to justify themselves in the U.S. by talking about how actually philosophy majors have really good mid-career earnings, and then they would also talk about how like actually a lot of tech CEOs have philosophy degrees. And I'm sure if we were running that campaign again, it would be J.D. Vance's face. They're like the most famous philosophy major in the world right now. Or it'd be J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, and they'd be like, "See, a philosophy degree can take you places." And it just seems it buys into the wrong kind of logic, right? To rationalize the degree.
For sure, and it is wild now that like when you hear about philosophy or philosophy majors or those things these days, it often comes from like weird right-wing figures who have their philosophies, and there's various articles and pieces these days about the various like philosophers and philosophies of Silicon Valley. And when you hear someone like a Musk get to speak extemporaneously, he goes on these tangents that sound vaguely philosophical. So it's a big bummer that like that's the side of things that is at least taken on like the affect or the outfit of philosophy to kind of justify soft fascism.
I mean, has any single philosophical argument done more damage than that stupid simulation argument that like fried the brains of half of Silicon Valley, and they decided maybe we are living in a simulation, and because they took it seriously. No philosopher that I know takes it seriously. No, they did. But those ideas have existence outside of the academy, but in one particular sector of the world right now.
Yeah, and I also think like there's the simulation stuff, and then I feel like in a more like socio-political ethical side, I feel like people taking the trolley problem way too seriously has led to some of the most bizarre forms or attempts at like social justice or social ethics
Mm-hmm.
that are almost like low-key sociopathic. It's something like years ago we made a video about that, and some people were very mad at it. But that's one of those things where like even teaching, I was always hesitant to use the trolley problem because I feel like people it serves its purpose, but when people view it as like a principle in itself to derive meaning from, things go, no pun intended, off the rails.
Yeah, and a lot of utilitarians sort of famously argue that utilitarianism is true, but we shouldn't like tell people, because if they start thinking like utilitarians, they're going to end up in horrible places, like alienated from their fellow human beings and doing all kinds of weird stuff. So the best thing to do is practice like massive self-deceit about moral truth. And that's what I think we all should have done. We should have never introduced utilitarianism into the classroom, because
God.
then it just
I listen. I fully agree. And for anyone just tuning in, by the way, we're hanging out with philosopher and video essayist and whatever you want to call yourself, Jared Henderson. If you don't subscribe to his channel, you should. We'll have the link in the description and stuff like that. And subscribe to a Substack if you want to read. There's people that still read.
There are some people who still read. We're about to read an Ursula K. Le Guin novel together.
Ooh, so that's very cool.
We're gonna read The Dispossessed, which is like one of my favorite novels, anyways. So
amazing. So here, let me focus on your channel for a little bit. And I will say this, and friends, this is the first time Jared and I have talked. He's not paying me to say this. He doesn't have any info on me that could ruin my life that's bribing me into this. A thing I loved about discovering your channel is it's very easy to go backwards. There's certain channels that are very contemporary or very tied to a thing that happened that week. So it's been very fun. There's days where I'm like, oh, I can just scroll backwards and see you talk about a book that you like a lot, which I genuinely think is very cool and very fun. I remember one of the first videos, or second or third videos I watched yours, when I saw like, oh, we got Cormac McCarthy in the thumbnail. Let's go. Mm-hmm. But recently you've been on this tear. It's almost like a sort of, but from an external perspective, it seems like a series of sorts of kind of talking about interesting yet depressing things that I think directly affect or relate to a lot of people I imagine that are in the demographic of your audience and ours. So, thinking about your video on why everyone stopped reading, the amusing ourselves to death video, being burned out, being lonely, like all of these things that you do a good job of thinking about philosophically and critically, but it feels so immediate. So what led to the shift of sort of focusing on topics like that and trying to speak, I don't know, I feel like more to the immediacy of things people are experiencing?
Well, I realized that just making a video that's like, let me talk about Aristotle. I mean, that people will watch it, and it's not all about getting the maximum amount of views, but they don't realize like why it would be good for them to know more about like Aristotle's theory of the good life. And so what I started thinking, and probably about 6 months ago is when it really hit, was like, let's just think like, what is a question that I have wondered about in my own life, or I know people are worried about, and I want to prove to you that philosophy is relevant here. So like, that's what I've been trying to do lately. Like, I have a video coming out probably next month, because it's still sort of in progress, on the history of the Protestant work ethic. And
okay, this was on my list of things to ask you, because you hinted this in your most recent video. So
yeah, and that's basically just like the question of like, why do we work so much? How did work take over our lives? And well, there's a history to this problem, and there have been philosophers who have done a lot of damage, actually, when thinking about this problem, because not only can some philosophers help us make sense of the world, some philosophers have made the world actively worse, and it's useful to bring that up too. But yeah, I just started thinking like, what are the problems? I guess I'm thinking of more as like a problems first approach. What is the problem that someone might be interested in, and then I will find a way to make philosophy relevant to that problem, which I think is, at least for the kind of thing that we do, right? Because we are on YouTube and we are aiming for a wide audience who might not know what they're looking for yet when it comes to philosophy, we have to like come to them. But at the same time, you can't talk down to them while you do that. So when you introduce the ideas, it has to be real. It can't just be like, oh, and there's some philosophers, because they'll know that you're talking down to them. They'll know that you think they're stupid, and you don't want them to think that, and you shouldn't think that anyways.
Yeah. Well, then to follow up on that, with videos, especially like your video on focus, your video on burnout, how much of that is you intellectually being aware of things that are in the zeitgeist, and how much of that is you being like, shit, I can't focus, or my God, I'm burned out, and using your own experience as a motivator?
It is 100% projection.
Okay.
It is 100% projection, man. Like I'm a guy who's like on his phone too much and works too much and feels burned out and wonders like, why didn't I read as many books in the last couple of years? These are things that I'm struggling with. And I guess the bet is that if I'm struggling with them, maybe there are other people out there who are too. So I'm not doing market research. I'm not even Googling first. Is or like, the loneliness video starts with me talking about how like when I moved across the country, eventually I stopped calling my friends. Like, why did we do that? Like, what happened to our to us where we stopped talking on the phone? And so I was like, okay, like that's a thing that probably has happened to a bunch of people. People move around a lot. You fall out of touch. So let's explore it.
Yeah. So your most recent video is called "Why We're Lonely." The intro to that one, really, I felt like it punched me in the gut because I related to some of that. You talk about leaving for grad school, moving to a new city, and being in a really isolated period in your life. I mean, I found that interesting. I mean, both because it's super relatable, and I think relatable to people regardless of where they're at in life. But it also made me reflect on, especially when I look back on it, how isolating and lonely elements of like the grad school life can be, and that life of an academic or training in any field. And looking back on those years of my life, and sometimes having the retroactive ability to be like, oh, I was super depressed then. I didn't know I was super depressed then, but I was almost. And I think there's a way that you can valorize, or I think I did this sometimes, of like, it is good that I spend lots of time alone reading books and probably drinking too much and obsessing over all these things, because that's what one does. That's how one becomes an intellectual. And a distinction you bring up in the video is between loneliness and solitude. Wondering, and everyone, to be clear, go watch this video. This is nothing. This is me giving my Cliff's Notes. You got to watch it. But can you say a little bit about that distinction between loneliness and solitude? Because I found that really interesting and hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah, so it's like loneliness probably can't just be when you're alone. That was like the motivating thought. And so I needed a phrase for it, or a word. So I used solitude, and I was just like looking at. I mean, one of the ways I like to approach problems is to see if there are like many traditions that have converged on a similar answer to a question, at least as like a jumping off point. So the fact that you can like look at all of these different like wisdom or religious traditions, and they'll have like hermits who go out into the desert and like meditate or something, and you can find it in Buddhism, and you can find it in Christianity, you can find it in Islam, you can find it in like every kind of major religion, I think, too. And you can also find like secular versions of this. It's like, well, there might be something to the idea. So I'm thinking that solitude is when you purposely isolate for the purpose of doing something that you value. For doing something that matters, whether that's pursuing wisdom in some kind of abstract sense or doing art. I brought up O'Keeffe going out into this ranch in Arizona and painting this mountain over and over again. She didn't have it didn't even have running water, I think, that cabin. That can be really powerful for people. And I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush to say that if you're just always too alone or something, it's a problem. So then loneliness, what is it? I think that loneliness is roughly what the U.S. Surgeon General actually has a fairly good definition that I worked with, which is that it's where there is a perceived or felt need. They seem to say like whether that's real or imagined. I can say something about that in a second, but a perceived unmet need between the amount of social connection that you have versus what you desire. I say that I think it's weird that they talk about whether it's real or imagined, because it's almost like by definition, if you feel that you don't have enough social connection there, then probably you don't. Like it's that you're the only one who would know these sorts of things. But so it's okay if you don't like to hang out with people all the time. That's fine too. That's not the kind of loneliness that is going to kill you over time, or that's linked to depression and all this stuff. And of course, the causal pathways for how loneliness leads to heart disease, is going to be complex, and I'm not the guy to talk about it. But just to think that, like, yeah, there is this kind of pathological isolation, that you can also experience too. Another thing to keep in mind: is that you can be lonely even when you're in like a crowded room. You can be lonely while you're talking or filming a video that's going to be seen by 1 million people. You can be lonely sitting with your family. And that's because it's not just like being around people isn't enough. You know, a lot of comments I got in that video were like, "How could you ever be lonely if you have a wife?" Or "How could you ever be lonely if you have a
Let
boyfriend?"
me tell you, friends.
But like so I'm married. I have a kid. I have a young kid, and I was thinking actually, it's really normal for young parents to be really lonely, but they're never alone because
let
you're
me ask
always.
you this. Yeah, if you don't mind me asking, how old's your kid?
He's going to be 2 in a couple of months.
Wow, we're almost the same guy, Jared.
Yeah.
Except you have great hair and I have a tiny bit of it left. Yeah, I have a 19-month-old, so
Okay, yeah. My son
we're
is
a little
basically
behind
the
you.
exact same age. Yeah.
Awesome. But no, but I 100% get what you're saying there, and I'm sure a lot of our audience does as well. That like not being lonely is not just that you are physically proximate to people. I almost think of it as a sense as like when you are around people that have the time to intentionally like engage, interact, and almost like validate you. Or I don't know. Sometimes there's a sense in which, and we can maybe talk about this, where as a dude that's gotten older, I spend less time than I used to, like hanging out with the dudes or getting beers with friends. And sometimes when I do, the thing that feels so nice is even just the simplicity of like, friend brings up thing, I'm enthusiastic about thing, I have thing I'm thinking about, he too is enthusiastic about that thing. And there's like a shared micro community of enthusiasm that's sort of life-giving.
You know, when you were you mentioned that grad school can be really lonely, and that's absolutely true, and it could lead to depression. It's totally normal. But one thing I do miss about grad school was that I just had some friends who lived really close to me that if we wanted to, we were like, "Do you just want to go grab a beer like after this seminar or something?" And you just go do it. And maybe you talk about philosophy because you're all into it, and then you put on a bad song on the jukebox and everybody laughs, and then it continues for a while. And like that kind of just like there's no path. There's no designated path that social interaction is going to follow, but you're just kind of enjoying it the whole time. And I remember I had a time in grad school where we all got really into playing darts, and like all of us were bad, but we were like it was like fun to play darts. And that's not a thing I actually care about doing, but it became like a thing where we got to all be weirdly enthusiastic together, like you were saying. And finally when we got like a little bit better, it was like great. And then like some guy at the bar would be like, "I'll show you how to play darts," and destroy us. But it was just good to like do stuff like that together.
I mean, the best part about I really think the best part of grad school life is that you kind of have like your version of the show Cheers to an extent. For very young people, Cheers was a popular American sitcom in which the same people hung out at the same bar in Boston every day, and Ted Danson was there. But
it's a great example because if you go to Boston, you go to the Cheers bar, and it's just a tourist trap. So if you want to see sort of America in a microcosm.
Oh yeah, no, but I went to grad school in Scotland in an area where certain times of year it got dark at like 2 p.m. And we all kind of in our grad student community realized we were getting horrifically seasonally depressed. And it was the thing where we would like drag each other out of people's apartments sometimes to go to a pub and hang out. And there's like a normalcy of it and ability to do that. And when people get older sometimes, and I talk to friends about this quite regularly, like, people want to be hanging out. They want to spend time with friends, but those hangs get fewer and farther between. More stuff's going on in life. And I think to make a slight connection here, I think there's a lot of connection between kind of the loneliness. And, you mentioned that some in your video, some call it an epidemic, but you look at like the communities who are supposedly being very affected by loneliness. You look at, communities online where a lot of young men are getting radicalized to various degrees. And there does seem to be a connection there. And I don't know about like the exact, audience demographics of your channel. I would imagine our demos are more alike than not. And, it's loneliness not only can create, like you mentioned, effects on our physical health, can lead to some dark shit depending on how that gets taken advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone asked me if I thought political polarization or sort of online radicalization was causing loneliness. And I think it actually goes in the exact opposite direction. Like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
I think like a lonely culture is more prone to going down really dark intellectual paths.
Yeah.
And I think that this has basically happened. That's actually a point Hannah Arendt makes when she talks about loneliness too, in the origins of totalitarianism, that it's easier for you to kind of go along with it when you're really disconnected and lonely from people. And I think that when you create like a really lonely world, you don't have that same pull back to reality. That's like, I don't know, man, it would be like really hard for me to like viscerally hate women if I had to like, because of the fact that I have to like go and I see a lot of women in my life, like coming back and pulling it, or say this for any group, or if you're just totally detached from everybody, then being just a total nihilist, or being like a total, you know, like you've become a convinced anti-natalist or something, we should all die off, or something, becomes somehow a more palatable conclusion. And I guess, you know, despite it being a guy who like studied logic and things, I'm increasingly convinced that the philosophical positions that we come to hold are often a product of sort of our psychological drives rather than reasoned consideration, especially sort of the ones that we sort of just come to us one day. And that's what I think is critical here. If you're lonely, you don't have that connection to other people, it's just going to let you start considering conclusions that would always seem repugnant to you in the past, or would have in theory, and then who knows like how far you can go.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm a pretty dyed-in-the-wool dialectics guy, and I often think about what happens when our relationships with ideas and people are these flat, abstract, and one. I do think it's much easier to develop these kind of hateful abstractions when there's no cultural material interaction with the people that you hate so much. It's sometimes why I do think like urban living and doing things communally, and even like education and universities are like good because you are forced to develop ideas around people.
There's this oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of this guy. It's this he's probably fairly old by now, but he was like the son of the leader of like a huge like white supremacist movement. But then he went to college at like a fairly liberal arts, like sort of what you would your sort of stereotypical liberal arts school, and he wrote a memoir about essentially de-radicalizing by being because like a bunch of Jewish students kept inviting him over for dinner. And like, look, I understand, you if there's someone who viscerally hates you or like vocally hates you, you don't have to take the first step and invite them over for dinner. But he kind of mentions like, I had to get to know them as people, and like the intellectual facade kind of just crumbles when you hate this. Because one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the arguments that are used to back up these like rather hateful attitudes are really philosophically flimsy. They're usually really bad. And so it doesn't take that much to crumble, to make them start crumbling, if you can just get someone to start questioning it at all the first time.
Yeah. I mean, that makes me think, by the way, Henry, people in the chat are saying that things are glitchy. Hopefully you guys can hear us and see us okay.
We had a slight disconnect, reconnect. Everything's looking good now, although some people are saying there's lag on sound. But I'm
well, guys, just close your eyes and imagine two classically handsome men. Imagine a Pitt and a Clooney type speaking. I won't say who's who, but just imagine that. But no, because a part of teaching I loved, and this is going to make me sound like the radicalizing DEICRT professor everyone wants you to be afraid of. But I remember a student I had in particular at a school I taught at for 3 years, and I had her multiple times. And first semester, her freshman year, it was like a intro to like ancient philosophy class, and it was like a Jesuit school, so they all had to take philosophy. And she like opened her laptop, and it had this big like Mitt Romney sticker on it that I was kind of confronted with, and like an American flag thing. And again, I wish we were back in the day where Mitt Romney was the guy.
I felt nostalgia for a sec.
I know, it feels kind of quaint.
Oh my gosh, I remember the election of Mitt Romney, a friend of mine looking at me before we got the results and saying, I can't imagine a worse outcome than Mitt Romney being elected. And he meant it sincerely, and I was like, God, brother, it turns out you should have had a better imagination.
If only we could have a charming Midwestern Mormon conservative in charge of us. But it was a thing where like I had that experience, and I think in my head I even kind of was like, oh boy, one of these. And I think it was like the next year, she like wrote a paper for me that was kind of inspired. I think it was riffing off like Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir and kind of at the edges of like existentialist and Marxist ethics. And we had like a really cool talk, I think in our second or third year, about how like, yeah, I showed up at college and all the stuff I knew was stuff that might about it. But that is like the last few years, the word I keep thinking of is like, oh, are we not live? Okay, great, because we're really cooking. Kidding, but no, but I think, and I haven't. I'm sure there's like really good philosophy books written about this that I haven't read. But yeah, to me, it just seems like the expansion of empathy is a thing that is missing, and a thing that even connects to some of the themes around like loneliness and social alienation.
Yeah, I mean, just how do you get? The question I've kind of am stumbling on though is like, how do you get someone over that hump, like the first one, right? When they feel totally disconnected from other people, like how do you get them to care at all the first time? Because like once they care a little bit, you kind of know how to expand the moral circle. But it's like when they're so far gone, how do you get them to care just one bit? It's almost like arguing with an egoist. It's just really hard to give an egoist on their own terms an argument for not being an egoist.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what you think about this then, that, the corner of, the philosophy YouTube world that you live in is a lot more about exploring ideas, being open to thinking about books, kind of experientially thinking about how ideas affect our lives. But there's like another popular usage of, and I'm going to use philosophy in scare quotes here, philosophy, especially logic, which paints philosophy or the tools of philosophy as mechanisms for, annihilating your competitor on the field of battle. And that what logic or philosophy are about is like a hyper masculine ownership of ideas and arrival at an absolute sense of truth. How do you, I don't know, like, I guess, what do you think about that? How do you sort of combat or grapple with that in the work you do, especially knowing that there are a lot of young people on the internet who think that philosophy is that?
Yeah. So one thing is that I typically, I mean, I've made some stuff about fallacies before, but I found that I'll probably never do it again, because I found that if you talk about fallacies, people are just like, they're looking for reasons to call their opponents stupid.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, well, everyone's always being fallacious and stuff. And even in stuff I do now, the amount of comments that I received on my book thing about why everyone stopped reading that were like, well, it's all the Democrats or it's all the Republic, like that, like the fact it was like the first thing that people said about the video. I felt like such a weird takeaway from, because the video wasn't like about that stuff. And so I try to typically in my stuff not paint like adversarial pictures of ideas, and instead sort of explore the ideas for their own sake. So I've talked about Stoicism, and I did a video where I tried to actually explain, like, if you read the Stoics, here's what they would actually say. And it's a radical concept. And you could talk about how the Stoics had these fierce debates with like the academic skeptics or like the Peripatetics, but I decided to not even go in those grounds to like talk about the how they criticized each other, and just decide, you know what, I'll just like say for 30 minutes breaking it down into what Stoics actually believed, like what they wrote in these texts that we have fragments of, and we could talk a little bit about those ideas, to just let someone kind of sample it a little bit. And then one of the ways I also do it is like to say, if I'm talking about a book, whether that is positively or negatively, I link it down below every time. Like, you should probably just go read it. And if you have a thought about the book, you should read it. Okay, I don't know when this video will come out, so it's like this. Don't go subscribe to me if you think you're going to get this next week. I have been working on a video about Ayn Rand for like 2 years.
Ooh.
I have stacks and like bound copies of her newsletters that I've like been reading through.
You're in it.
And I've been trying my best. And this is a person I have like no philosophical sympathies for, like at all. But I have this rule that I won't make the video until I really feel like I've got like a grasp of her views and thoughts, even if the video then ends up being like, here's why all of these ideas are really bad, like, and how she led a cult, and
no, but that's
in her real life.
So fair. Like a kind of pet project of mine that I need to stop doing in recent years has been, watching the videos of people like Jordan Peterson and folks in that like wheelhouse. Um, God, like James Lindsay, these real bad guys. Precisely because some of the stuff they're obsessed with talking about is like post-war French philosophy and Marxism, things that I know stuff about and have read the books on, and it drives me crazy to see the scope and range some of these people have, um, and the way they'll speak about things that they just at a base level clearly haven't read. And sometimes people will respond to me by being like, you're just mad they don't agree with the thing you like. And there's times, especially with Marx stuff, where I want to be like, no, I don't even agree with all this. The point is that, like, if you're not going to like this stuff, if you're not going to agree with the ideas, disagree for the right reasons. Like, disagree with what Marx or Sartre or Foucault wrote. Don't disagree with what a benzo-addled, failed Canadian psychiatrist tells you that these people read. Don't disagree with what the Christo-fascist, failed mathematician swordsman tells you that Adorno was talking about. And it's just wild how much reach people can have these days, not even getting to like a Wikipedia understanding of people in the tradition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Marx might be like the guy on the internet who everyone feels okay talking about without reading, because he's often a very boring writer. Like Capital is a boring read.
Just about to say that. He's not like this bloodthirsty, exciting guy. He's pretty boring.
Yeah, the young Marx is way more exciting, and he's like more difficult to understand probably.
Yeah,
he was like, but yeah, I mean that blows me away. I've thought about making a Marxism video at some point, and the thing is, I just know that it would take me years to get comfortable because there's so much to think about, and also to do it right would probably be beyond it. But I just don't think that there are enough people who would be willing to open. He at least was willing. This guy spoke more classical languages than you. But he hated the. It's like this basic kind of understanding stuff that. I mean, I guess we could say it's just like about good faith. Like, are you willing to engage in these things in good faith? Yeah. But I have to say, I am sympathetic to anyone who spends a lot of time watching or reading some of these like contemporary guys who have no substance in them in the end, because I was like a long time Yarvin reader thinking there's got to be something there, right? Like he's built up this whole school of thought that everyone keeps citing that seems to be gaining traction. So I'll read Yarvin to understand like what the new right is thinking. Yeah. And I came away just thinking, I don't know if there's that much going on here, guys.
And I do wonder, like, if there's a thing that maybe can be learned from a Yarvin type, it's like that there is a non-academic audience of individuals that has a desire to think philosophically, to engage with philosophical ideas, and to feel like they're reading things that are going for it a bit. And I feel like a lot of more like liberal coded media is very explanatory, is very reductive. Yeah. And I do think, and it's a hard balance, but it's a thing that I'm sure we all think about in creating YouTube videos. Like, how far can you go? Like, what's the point of alienating an audience versus exciting them? And I do think a takeaway of some of the Yarvin stuff is like, I think most of it is obtuse nonsense, but there's something to that form that like people are excited about, and people like want to, I guess, be pushed in a certain direction.
And a lot of stuff that's like on like the left, if you were looking for like who's the left's Yarvin, I have no idea right now, but it's gonna feel like they're writing academic essays.
Yeah,
Yarvin doesn't even engage in the pretense that he is a blogger. Like he is. I'll grant him an intellectual, as he called himself in the New York Times thing to explain why he wasn't being invited to parties. But he's an intellectual, but he's a blogger first and foremost. And I don't think that there's a lot of people, sort of liberal coded or like left coded, that kind of do it for they do it for the game of blogging. Like they're kind of just into it.
No, they want the love of the game, man.
Yeah, they're sort of just like, well, I could have done this. I could have written an academic book, but I'll just like dumb it down a bit for people, or I'll widen the scope a little bit. But with Yarvin, you feel like there is this, on the surface, you feel like you're engaging with really dangerous ideas, And actually,
Yeah.
they might be really dangerous. And you think there's a lot of depth to them.
Mhm.
And he's got this infuriating style with too many italics, so you think maybe there's like some hidden meaning in all of it.
All the italics, yeah.
But he went for it, I mean, yeah. But you're saying, I think that's right. He just goes for it, and that has like a certain allure, and it also shows that people will take up those ideas and do things with them. I think actually the mood on the right now is that Yarvin's kind of passé by comparison. Like he's made
That's
it into the
wild.
White House, and so now you need to move on to the next big thing.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me when I was my key grad school years were like I mean like '07 to 2012 or 2013, and I was in the UK for most of that time. And I mean, and connected to Yarvin, like the work of Nick Land was a big thing. Ideas around like accelerationism or left accelerationism, the sort of like people that read like weird gothic horror connected it to ideas about the inevitable death of the sun and how that needs to affect the way we think through philosophical questions. And it was interesting then that it felt like a lot of philosophically motivated, at least like vaguely progressive or radicalized young people, and to see how a lot of that same stuff then got appropriated by Yarvin and co. I think does show like people are interested in kind of radical or exciting ideas. I mean, go ahead if you have something, because I was going to pivot.
Well, I think if they're radical, they at least have the allure of like everyone might be wrong. Like that's the I guess here's the thing, like like the true sense of radical, it's like questioning the foundations of things, like and I get the sense that for a lot of people they're like, well, they hear Marx or something, like it's someone who's like intellectually curious, at least they hear like Marx, they don't think radical anymore because they've just like heard the name so often. They don't they like where with guys like Yarvin or Land was like this too, yeah, where it's proposing something totally different, and that if I understand what's in this book, I've like unlocked the secret to the world, and no one else in this coffee shop's going to get it. But if you tried to ask, hey, does anyone who understands Marx, half the guys would raise their hands.
Yeah, but and that feeling especially too, for me, that's like one of the most exciting and scary feelings of philosophy. Like I have visceral memories of times I was reading a book and you read something that either makes you feel like you got the secret code and now you understand it, or that sort of like opens up a world in front of you, and that more. And I was never like an ancient philosophy guy, never a big Greek philosophy guy. Often at times only read that stuff seriously as like a way to compliment Hegel or something like that. And the more I get away from academia, the more I go back to the Greeks, and the more I keep a foot in the world of like Kierkegaard, who's always been one of my guys. And I think the thing about both of those moments, or like schools of figures, they embody what I think is like a philosophical attitude, and the philosophical attitude is one of a sort of like openness, acknowledging that you might always be wrong, and knowing that there's this level of unknowability and contingency under everything that requires, and maybe this is jumping ahead to a more existentialist view, that you always have to be engaged with the world in your thinking, and you always have to be willing to acknowledge that you might be wrong. And it's even why I really like philosophers who, over their careers, change their minds or push their thought in different directions. Because I think not only is it a more interesting and I guess like intellectually humble way to approach stuff, it's a way more interesting way to, I guess it's going to sound pretentious, like live philosophically. Because you're not living philosophically if you're like, I figured it out, now I'm just going to do the thing that I figured out. You're living algorithmically at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally okay. I might be more comfortable with stuff that sounds self-helpy in philosophy than you are. But like to say you should think of your life as a big philosophical project, like I'm totally fine with this. And like this is how I basically conceive of like what Aristotle's actually getting at in the Nicomachean Ethics, is that your life is this one big project of so that we might become good, as he puts in like book 2, I think. That's the point of it. But a lot of that's trial and error. That's not about like arriving. One of the things that really draws me to Aristotle actually is that it's not about arriving at the right view of the virtues and then like you've unlocked how you have to live. It's like, oh, I now kind of understand what the virtues are. I have to develop them, and that's going to require making a lot of mistakes and then like recalibrating over and over again. And it's like an ongoing project. I think Kierkegaard as well, like that living with like this kind of fundamental uncertainty in the in the world is kind of critical. There's this great Thomas Nagel piece where he's like talking about the absurd, this is like an analytic guy trying to make sense of the claim
Yeah.
that life is absurd. But he kind of arrives at this end conclusion where he just says that what happens is we all kind of realize that like our most fundamental sort of identity constituting beliefs, our moral views and things are a product of our history. And yet, so what we have to do is just become comfortable with like a little bit of irony in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
that we still want to firmly believe them, but once we've come to grips with this contingency, we don't abandon them, but we hold them just a little bit ironically. And I think, we all have to also be willing to become comfortable with that too, that we haven't, us as like pure, rational, amazing intellectuals haven't like come to terms with like the what the truth is. Exactly. We are the long products of this history. We still have to earnestly pursue the truth, but we also sort of kind of shrug at the end and say, or like what philosophy talk shouldn't end with like going, I like the guy going like, I did a good job. Here's what I believe, and then going, but maybe not.
Yeah.
It should be there.
Do you have time for me to ask you a couple more things?
Yeah, I have a few minutes.
Okay, cool. One quick thing, and this is maybe more meat and potatoes, practical stuff. I wonder, every time around, I'm gonna call you something different. As a digital philosopher of sorts,
Yeah.
How do you deal with this problem? Maybe it's not a problem, but a thing that I see as a problem sometimes is like, let's say I'll use Marx again as an example. So sometimes if I'm talking to someone about Marx, and they're yelling at me because they're like, "Oh, this idea, this is stupid, or this is bad, or this is wrong," and I might say something like, "Oh, I get what you're saying." But actually, what he's doing there is responding to a thing Feuerbach did. Or, oh, no, he's really responding to this weird thing that Hegel said once. And in doing that, part of my brain is like, this is good. It's encouraging people to know that it's all connected as a part of a tradition. Because, of course, you then go, well, Hegel is saying this, but he's really thinking of Kant here. But Kant's actually thinking of Descartes, who's really riffing off this thing Aristotle said. But I guess other times I feel like, is it not helpful to present philosophy to people as this like Russian doll where you never get to the end, and is there a way in which that's like implicitly gatekeeping or something? So I'm wondering how you think about presenting ideas or presenting figures as disconnected, even implicitly, from tradition when you have 10 to 15 minutes to talk about a thing.
I like to think of it a little bit differently than this long progression.
Yeah.
And I'm being a little free here. As just this giant kind of atemporal web of connections of ideas, and that the point is, to explore a concept or something, you just have to pick a sort of a node on this web, and you just kind of have to pick one. Yeah. Because there just is no perfect starting point. And then from there, you will explore many connections that will go in lots of different directions, and that's great. But I like to start by just saying, like, let me present this on its own a little bit, so it can seem a little disconnected. I really do try to resist the idea that, like, to understand Marx, we have to go to Hegel and we have to go to Feuerbach and we have to go, because what that leads to is like a neurotic guy close reading Plato, and that's how you get like another Straussian in the world. And like you just need to. I guess it's the same thing actually with the Nagel stuff. We all kind of understand that we're, by coming into the history of philosophy at any point, it's always like an imperfect starting point, but it has to be your starting point. Like whatever it is going to be the one that you choose. And it's actually a momentous choice, but it's just one you have to pick, because if you don't, I mean, even then, picking Plato now, to read Plato now is different than to have lived Plato's ideas there. And as we receive Plato, you're already going to be reading him as a 21st century, weird psychology sort of person, in the sense of like Western and educated, usually stuff like that. Like you're bringing all of that to the text too. So I don't know. There just is no perfect starting point. Give up on that, but then explore those connections like as much as you can. Understanding it's like this big web of belief. You will kind of have a better understanding of the whole as you understand more and more of these connections. Well,
guys, that was Jared. Whether you know it or not, you're being very German idealist right there.
That's the thing. I left my analytics department, and I feel like I'm secretly becoming a Hegelian, just like over time. And so
it's
you became an Aristotelian or a Platonist or something.
Yeah, we all end up doing that. Last thing I want to talk to you about, I'm just curious about this. Tell us a little bit about your process for making videos. And correct me if I'm wrong too. Are you a one-man shop kind of doing it all yourself?
I have an editor that I work with,
Mhm.
who helps me with like the production of the videos. But aside from that, it's just me.
Yeah.
I'm writing everything. I'm recording everything. Basically, what I do is I just like I have this big list of topics that I know I want to explore. They're usually corresponding pretty well with the books that I'm reading.
Mhm.
I'm about to start a close read of the concept of anxiety with a bunch of people. So
Oh,
I don't know.
awesome.
I don't know. In like 3 to 6 months, I'll have something about anxiety, and it'll actually
Can't
be
wait.
about Kierkegaard.
Have you read that book before?
I've tried to read that book before.
Okay. If at any point you're reading it and you want an opinion on all the best secondary sources, let me know because I'd
Okay.
love to help you. That was about the third of my PhD was on that book.
Okay.
But sorry,
Cool.
keep
Yeah.
going.
So I'm just trying to, in my own personal time, just trying to freely explore ideas, and
Mhm.
then connecting them to some topic. I also do know that like there are some philosophers that I just want to do these explainers about. I did one for Aristotle's Ethics. I did one for Stoicism. I want to do one for Nietzsche because I don't think there's a good
Yeah.
one on the internet yet. Like I don't think there's like a good 30 to 45 minute one there. So it's just a gap that I could fill. I could look a little bit there. But it's just, then I start wondering for a good video, I have to be able to have my own thoughts about the subject matter, and that usually requires that I've read at least 3 to 5 primary sources
Yeah.
to like be able to think through the topic a little bit, and that's where I go. So
Yeah.
the loneliness video, you talk about Arendt, you talk about Putnam, you talk about a few other people, you put them together, and then you get something. But also, I don't know if you're motivated at all by this. I just like open up the internet and am confronted by like man-made horrors beyond comprehension sometimes. Like, I mean, I saw it was the thing that got me on the loneliness kick was actually the AI friend thing. It
Yes.
was the AI friends, and I was like, oh no. I wrote about it on Substack like crazy for like 2 weeks. I just kept writing about how awful it was, and I was like, oh, now it eventually could become a video. Like I was like, what we've done is take this beautiful thing about humanity, this our ability to form friendships, something that philosophers for 2,500 years have talked about how it's like this is such an essential part. Aristotle says that without friends, no one would
Mhm.
choose to live. And then we decided, you know what technology can do? Replace that. So that now when you're lonely working at your terrible cubicle job, you can just talk to your AI friend to feel
God,
less
that's tough.
bad.
God, it's
Like
tough.
that's, I feel like a certain amount of horror or anger at how the world treats us all kind of is very motivating.
Yeah. Well, I asked for an hour. You've given us an hour of your time. Jared, I feel like I could ask you way more. So we should do this again sometime.
Absolutely, this would be
Um,
great.
Really delightful to talk to you. And then, I'll say this, you can let people know other stuff. Guys, Jared has obviously a YouTube channel that you should subscribe to. If you don't, what are you doing? Also has a Substack. That's how I feel like that's how I know you're serious. Not a lot of YouTubers out here have the Substack, letting you know they're capable of writing words and not just speaking into a camera. So please check that out as well. Anything else people can do to follow your work, or anything else you want to recommend while you're here?
No, those are the two big ones. I feel like I've got some projects kind of cooking that I'll make announcements about, and they'll probably be on Substack first before they're about anything. So if you want to follow new stuff coming, that's the best place to do it.
Amazing. Well, said with so much earnestness, Jared, I really, really appreciate you taking the time, and really awesome to talk
Yeah.
to you. And I know that everyone in the chat has been very, very excited about this as well and been enjoying the chat. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. This was great. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Later, Jared. Guys, that was Jared Henderson, the host of Jared Henderson, a YouTube channel that I like a lot. That was fun. I really enjoyed that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I know there's maybe a little bit less chat engagement, than normal. But people are always asking, like, where's Jared? The channel is better when Jared is here. So I gave you Jared. I brought Jared back. Finally, Jared is back on Wisecrack. But that was a delightful time. Hopefully I can bug Jared to talk again at some point. And if you guys are checking this out after the fact, please do, leave comments and questions. Fucking tag Jared in them or something like that. I'm sure he'd love to see that. And do subscribe. Come on. And as always, subscribe. Let him know we sent you. We need to let him know the power of our community so that he fears us. Quick reminder that we have a partner for our stream. Our partner is Yes Please Coffee. I currently have a light tremble to my whole body because I'm on my second cup of the mix from Yes Please. The mix is their weekly blend. I like it very much. Again, it's my favorite coffee. I'm gonna keep drinking this coffee no matter what. And you get 20% off if you want with code WISECRACK, spelled like it sounds. And just a reminder as well, if you like books, who doesn't? Um, we have a deal with Verso Publishing. You get a discount with the code WISECRACK. We have a reading list over on the website. After talking to Jared, I can't help but feel like reading is good. I can't help but feeling like reading is a great thing. Hey, let's check in with producer Henry. Henry, I know you've been managing a lot of technical things during the stream
Things
thus far.
seem to have stabilized, but I do want to know why there were just like 3 random disconnects, reconnects, but I also don't want to compromise the stream. Otherwise, you know what? I completely forgot you even asked me how close to 50 I am. That was throwing me through a bit of a haze earlier. I'm just thinking.
So did I cause an inadvertent sort of existential crisis for you?
No, I've never really been scared of getting old, I think. I kind of enjoy being like 30 something, just noting the differences, yada yada. But yeah, 16 years I was like, "Oh, that's 4 by 4. That's not that far away."
Yeah, no one asked for my opinion on the thing I'm about to say, but the 30s are the best. If you're in your 30s right now, enjoy them.
They've been pretty fun, yeah.
Yeah. If you are, in your 20s and it sucks, hey, you still got your 30s,
Second lap around, there's another decade still.
Yeah. And if you're like me and you're in your 40s, like give up. What's the point?
No.
I'm
No.
just kidding. I'm just kidding,
I
guys.
do want to read The Dispossessed. Jared bringing it up remind me, like, I've read.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have The Lathe of Heaven sitting on my shelf to read, and Left Hand to Darkness is a really good book. But Ursula Le Guin, good writer, good books. Check them out, everyone.
Yeah. I'm going to have to do something that I think we do now about once every 6 shows, which is I got to do a piss run. Okay. Now, for those of you that know, here's how a piss run works. During the piss run, you all bet. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna take turns. Yeah. Okay. Also, Drift King says 41 here. No way, bro. Hit the gym. Drift King, I've started exercising more recently, and I'm gonna tell you guys the worst thing in the fucking world.
Do it. I actually last year benched more than I ever did in my 20s and my 30s, so that felt very accomplishing.
Guys, the other night, so I had this exercise bike, and it was in my garage, and I just kind of stopped using it because it wasn't in front of me, and my brain is broken. When the air quality got really bad in LA, I was like, I'll bring it in the house so I can maybe exercise safely. And for the first time the other day, like I finished work and I did like a 30-minute, ride on the bike. And I got off and I drank some water and I took like a cold shower. And I was just like, hey, everyone. And my wife was like, what the fuck happened to you? It's like, what? And she was like, you're so positive and happy. And then I went and like before dinner picked up a book and was just like reading. And my wife was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm just really engrossed in this book. And she was like, are you just reading like a kind of dense philosophy book casually before dinner? I was like, yeah. And I was like, fuck, exercise is magic. So here's the deal, guys. I'm going to do a piss break. You guess how long it's going to take me. I'm going to time it on my end. I have a timer right here. And then whoever wins. That's it. You just win. Okay. So get your predictions in right now. And I'm going to go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Get your predictions in now, folks. Also, JKLOL, the PR was only 230, but I mean, as far as bench press goes, I've wanted to get over 2 play for a while. I've been on and off, over the years. I usually just do kind of like healthy lifting in compounds. I've never really like swole maxed, but I'm starting to feel that way. I have more free time now. My 30s have been really fun in that way. Oh, will he wash his hands? Do we deduce time for that? That's an interesting question here in the chat. Nice, Drift King. Nice. You're gonna get super swole. No, I do want to start doing 225 for reps. I kind of had I also overhead pressed 1 plate. That was a big one for me because I had a shoulder injury a few years back that made me slow down on the lifting for a bit. So getting 135 just straight over my head, that felt very nice. Speaking of big, burly, swole dudes, Absolute Batman drops a new issue today. So, for anybody who's keeping regular with the habit, I strongly suggest Absolute Batman. Bruce Wayne is not rich. He is the son of a teacher and a civil servant. And it's like an interesting twist on the Batman dynamic.
130. 130. That's what I saw in front. I didn't stop it right away. I mean, it says 135 now, but 130 is how long it took. I feel like I saw people that were close to that. I see 115, 53, 141, 148, 110, 110, 121. Ooh, 134. Oh, but Steel Bulwark, so they thought it'd be 120.
Did you wash your hands?
I did. Guys, Courtney Lee, 138. I always wash. That would be gross. And also, you know, I've been sick recently, and my kid's been sick recently, and I got to wash my hands. Someone said fish oil pills. I'm all about that shit, guys. Get your omega-3s in. Get your vitamins in. So we'll talk about a few other things. Henry, if you want to do your thing.
I am not, but also, yeah, I need to run away now as well.
Do it now.
I'll be right
do
back.
It now. All right, while Henry's gone, guys. Just a few things. I, gave you all an update on some channel stuff on Monday. And realistically, I said too much. I have a tendency to overshare because I like to be really honest and stuff like that. Sometimes it can be a little much. But let me just hit a few, basics for you right here. And if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. But just to let you know, everything on the channel is going to be as is through the month of March. And as is means we're going to keep having 4 videos a month, or like a video a week on Wisecrack. We're gonna keep streaming a couple times a month. The things that are changing are we're only gonna have we're gonna have 2 more videos that go up over on Wisecrack 2, the channel where we've been making videos about TV and movies and video games. We have a Baldur's Gate 3 thing coming out over there. Amazing. So someone says the Adderall makes me overshare. For me, it's actually when I don't take my ADHD meds, I overshare. So yeah, Wisecrack 2, a couple more videos there, and that's going to wind down. Show Me the Meaning, we're going to do.
Oh, no.
I'm just giving the bullet point now. I'm not going to say too much. I'm going to only say the stuff I'm allowed to say. Show Me the Meaning is going to wind down as well in that time. And then starting in April, we're just going to be making less videos. I think they're going to be good. We're just going to make less because basically with limited resources, the call was, do we want to keep up our production schedule, maybe have the quality dip, or make less videos and have them be good? So we went with that one. So that's what we're doing. And like I said before, I guess I'll say less than I said before here, and anyone in the chat, if they want, can fill in the blanks. We are going to be streaming less from this channel, but there will still be streams. I'll just say that for legal reasons. So there will still be streams like this happening at similar times. They might just not all be from this channel. So if anyone else has questions about any of this, hit me up. And also, I really got some emails to wisecracklive666@gmail.com and some emails to my personal email address that some of you found, you fucking spies, where people are offering some ideas for the channel and how to maybe help us bounce back a little bit. And I really appreciate that. So there you go. If anyone saw it, Hassan watched our most recent video yesterday, and all I know is that for most of it, he just yelled at his chat. But appreciate him doing that. Someone said,
there was
I don't know if
an
you're
argument over the German party being fascist or not, the ADF.
That's fun. And I did see someone said that he referred to Wisecrack as friend of the show. It's like, I don't know you, dog. No, I'm kidding. That's very nice of him to say. So that's cool. I always like when Hassan checks us out. He has a cool audience. So if anyone is here because they saw us on his channel, then that's very cool. And I'm excited that you're here. We'll talk about a few other things today. The main event today, the meat of the meal, was one Jared Henderson. But we'll look at some other stuff as well, and if there's something there too. I'll say this. I don't know if anyone's seen it yet. We do have a new Marvel movie that came out, and I'm just going to say this. There's a review from a film critic I like. The headline is, "Marvel is now a giant slop machine." So it looks like Captain America Brave New World is gonna suck ass. If anyone has seen it, let me know. But it sounds like it's gonna suck. The question is then, go ahead, Henry.
Oh, I was just gonna ask if that was David Ehrlich's review.
Ooh, it wasn't. Did Ehrlich say it sucked as well?
I read his review, and yeah, I forgot what the title was, but he talks a lot about it. What it does that's not focused on its main character and what it's trying to tie into as far as like just being a slave to the franchise, and yeah.
Yeah. Some people are saying the stuff in the chat that there's places where stuff happens. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm bummed because I liked having MCU movies to see. I liked the ritual of that. Alex in the chat said, "Is now a man that's been slopping for the past several years." No, I think it has, but there you go. Lori, I did not see your brawl in the chat, but no fighting, guys. No fighting in the chat.
While you were on your pee break, I did talk a bit of comics with the chat, and yeah, I used to be so enthused for the movies, but I mean, I think there's some good books being written right now that you can like at least check out monthly, but it's not the same ritual as like a big tentpole movie. I was thinking about that this year with both Superman and the Fantastic Four being kind of July's two big movies.
1 second. Okay, cool. Sorry, just checking one thing out, guys. Let's do this, and then we'll wrap it up today. Henry pulled up a Politico article that is making the rounds that is called "Voters Were Right About the Economy, the Data Was Wrong." So, for those of you who remember, you might not remember this, the United States of America, aka Estados Unidos, shout out to the Gulf of America, we had an election. And a big thing in the election was that some people were like, "Hey, the economy feels bad. Hey, it feels like I have not made, enough money. It feels like I wish I had more of the money. It feels like my job isn't going super well. And I'm gonna vote based on that feeling." And there was one party that was kind of like, "Yeah, things suck, and it's the fault of these people." And there was another party that was like, "Things are actually good and you're wrong." There's another party that was like, old man Joe fixed it. And if you don't see that, suck my dick." That was the sort of vibe. And there were some people online, like that guy, Will Stansel, very Twittery guy, was using charts to tell everyone that they were wrong and that the economy was actually good. And for many of us, I think it created this sense of disorientation in as much as we felt like the economy was bad, but then people with charts told us it wasn't, Like we looked at our bank accounts and we were like, "I don't have the money." But then people looked at us and said, "You do though." And we said, "But I don't think I do." And this article gets into the truth of some of that. So let's check it out. Maybe we'll read the whole thing. Maybe we won't. I'm not very good at reading. And just a reminder before we get into that as well, you can always hit us up at wisecracklive666@gmail.com. Any questions you have about anything, hit us up there. If you're on Blue Sky, do follow Wisecrack on Blue Sky, because no matter what happens, that account will be there. I've said too much. I'm 1/8 Italian, so I'm allowed to do the voice. So let's check out this article. It says, before the presidential election, many Democrats were puzzled by the seeming disconnect between economic reality, as reflected in various government statistics, and the public's perception of the economy on the ground. Many in Washington bristled at the public's failure to register how strong the economy was. Shout out to Alec Opperman, who we talked with last week, who has a video about GDP. Well, basically, it feels like a lot of the metrics that are used to tell us if the economy is good or bad have little bearing to our actual life. So what they rarely considered was whether something else might be responsible for the disconnect. Whether, for instance, government statistics were fundamentally flawed. What? The government flawed? What if the numbers supporting the case for broad-based prosperity were themselves misrepresentations? What if, in fact, darker assessments of the economy were more authentically tethered to reality? I do want to say as well, I was very tempted on today's stream to watch some of the very unhinged Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and little boy X press conference yesterday. But I thought about some of you who occasionally in the chat, when we talk about Musk, say things like, I had to tap out early, he makes me feel bad, whatever. So I decided to not even suggest that. I did it for you. So I hope that means something. But guys, it's bad. Guys, it's real bad. I can't even believe we're here. What are we doing? What are we doing? So, and I saw someone mention the oligarchs in the chat. We're filming a video today about the oligarchs. So shout out to oligarchy. It says, on some level, I relate to the underlying frustrations having served as comptroller. Define that in the chat for $100 of the currency during the 90s. I've spent substantial chunks of my career exploring the gaps between public perception and economic reality, particularly in the realm of finance. Many of the officials I've befriended and advised over the last quarter century, members of the Federal Reserve, those running regulatory agencies, many leaders in Congress, it's only they consider it their responsibility to set public opinion aside, and opinion is what I just said, opinion aside, and deal with the economy as exists by the hard numbers. For them, statistics are thought to be as reliable as facts. In recent years, let's see, it says, the disconnect between hard government numbers, nice, and popular perception has spurred me to question that faith. Let's see, I'm going to skip ahead. It says, within the nation's capital, this gap in perception has had profound implications. For decades, a small cohort of federal agencies have reported many of the same economic statistics using fundamentally the same methodology or relying on the same sources. Scrolling down, there's a line that says, what we uncovered shocked us. The bottom line, now we get to it, is that for 20 years or more, including the months prior to the election, voters' perception was more reflective of reality than incumbent statistics. I'm going to read this again. Voter perception was more reflective of reality than the incumbent statistics. Meaning that, to rephrase what I've already said twice, a lot of the frustrations that normal people have had with their economic reality have been reflective of that reality. And a lot of the data, facts, figures, opinions that have been used to counter that or to imply that those people are in fact incorrect have been wrong. It reminds me of similar things that happen regarding the climate, right? People will say, hey, it feels pretty bad. It feels like weather stuff is popping off. It feels like things are getting hot or whatever. And occasionally official channels will be like, no, dog, you're good. Just chill. It's all good. Chevron, Chevron, Chevron. So our research revealed that the data collected by the agencies is largely accurate. Moreover, the people staffing those agencies are talented, but the filters used to compute the headline statistics are flawed. As a result, they paint a much rosier picture of reality than bears out on the ground. Well, what do you know? Well, what do you know? JITG in the chat says, everyone is wrong. Only I can ever be right. That is not a carrot, said the donkey. Yes, it is, said the eye, your master, Mr. Supreme All Colors. Now hush. Wow. That's a thing. That's a sort of thing. Someone said the climate is the opposite. I get what you're saying. Alex in the chat said they can watch some Lemon Musk, but we got to watch Larry David as Bernie afterwards. So I guess what you're saying is like, if we do Elon content, it has to be like a shot and chaser situation. That's fair. Let's see. It says, take as a particularly egregious example, what is perhaps the most widely reported economic indicator, unemployment. Shout out to anyone who's ever been unemployed. Known to the experts as the U3, the number misleads in several ways. First, it counts as employed the millions of people who are willingly underemployed. That is people who, for example, work only a few hours each week while searching for a full-time job. Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure we've all been there, right? Times where maybe you don't have the job you want to have, you don't have a full-time thing, but you're doing gig work, you're putting shit together, you're working a little bit. And yeah, they use that as an indicator of full employment, which doesn't feel right. I know personally when statistics came out about employment numbers, that was my thought. I was like, if employment is so good, why am I surrounded by so many folks on unemployment or people that are doing gig work or contract jobs or just working project to project? That doesn't feel indicative of a healthy, a healthy metric of employment. It says, second, it does not take into account many Americans who have been so discouraged that they're no longer trying to get a job. Finally, the prevailing statistics does not account for the meagerness of any individual's income. Like, yeah, it says, thus you could be homeless on the streets, making an intermittent income, and functionally incapable of keeping your family fed, and the government would count you as employed. Yeah, like I feel like, the employment statistic, and maybe the article says something like this. I'm just going to do the random thing where I decide that I know better than everyone. And, in the chat, Blasphemous says, so the people who are most affected by the economy actually know something about the economy. Like one way I think about this is, wouldn't it be better if the number that we actually used was something like how many people in America are making like minimum wage plus X, or how many are making a living wage plus whatever it might be, factoring in cost of living, so that rather than saying this percentage of people are employed, we're saying this percentage of people make enough money to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in the city they live in plus cost of living, or whatever it might be. That seems like it'd be a much better indicator of this sort of thing, because what does it tell us about the economy being healthy if people simply have some form of work? It says, I don't believe that those who went into this past election taking pride in the unemployment numbers understood that the near record low unemployment figures counted homeless people doing occasional work as employed. I mean, this is what I wonder too. Obviously, the author of this has done some government work, but I think we got to ask, like, is it, how do I frame this? I don't know. Like, do we think that people in the government are in good faith? Is Nancy Pelosi just like, oh, shucks, I did think that the numbers were good. Who would have known? Hit my husband with a hammer and call me Charlie,
I mean, she's following like what she's going to trade stocks on more than these statistics.
Seriously, man. I was going to say, or is it more of a case where they know, but they're just kind of cooking the books or framing the statistics such that it appeals to voters the most, It says, if you filter the statistic to include as unemployed people who can't find anything but part-time work or who make poverty wages, the percentage is actually 23.7%. In other words, nearly 1 in every 4 workers is functionally unemployed. So that's basically saying that, like, on top of the 4.2% unemployment rate, 23.7 of actual workers are unemployed, meaning that it's almost 30% of people who are functionally unemployed.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to just like reach up to make it clean, which means that almost a third of Americans are functionally unemployed.
How many people in the chat know somebody unemployed or underemployed?
Yeah.
Underhoused.
I mean, there's a stat in the next chunk down that says today, as a result, those keeping track are led to believe that the median wage in the U.S. stands at roughly $61,900, which to me seems crazy. But then it says if you track everyone in the workforce, a research reveals the median wage is actually a little more than $52,000 per year. American workers on the median are making 16% less than prevailing statistics would indicate. And, I'm old enough to know that even when numbers like 50 and 60,000 seem like a lot, in today's America, they are not. And that's one of the things, too. Sometimes people do this thing where they're like, oh, so-and-so's not a socialist because they make whatever the amount, whatever, you know what I'm saying? But, like, America sucks, man. Like, especially if you like, let's say you make, here, let's do some math. Okay. So let's say you make $52,000 a year. And I'm going to be generous here and say that you're taxed at 25%, even though it's probably more. So we'll do that times 0.75. So that leaves you with $39,000. Okay. Let's say you make that and you live in, let's think. So in LA, where I live, you're not getting a studio or in bedroom for less than $1,500 a month. But let's be nice and say maybe for $1,200 a month, you could get an apartment. So that's, let's see, so that's 1,200 times 12. So that's 1,440. Let's round it up to 15. We'll include utilities there. So that's 39,000 minus 15. And that takes us to 24,000, which means you got $2,000 a month. That's not including like retirement, healthcare costs, groceries, bills. If you got a family, car, gas, all I'm saying is shit gets expensive really quick. And I think sometimes, I mean, I just think like if we really think about how much one would have to make to have a lifestyle that feels like traditionally middle class, it's a lot. And I feel like people have a sort of a, I know Lori Christian, that was I went too low there, but I see someone in the chat, Nate's List, who says, shouts to Nate List, way better than Craig's List. Fuck Craig. Me and all the homies ride with Nate. The move is shacking up with significant others. I mean, that's true though. Like, one of the only reasons I've been able to do the work I've done and kind of like survive has been shacking up with a significant other. Like when I moved to Los Angeles, the only reason I was able to survive is because my partner was like, hey, for this many months, don't worry about paying rent as you like get on your feet. But if it wasn't for that, I would have been, effed in the B. Let's go back to this article. Yeah, it says perhaps the most prominent issue of the campaign, inflation, tracks much of the same story. Democrats spent much of the campaign pointing out that inflation had abated by election day, blah, 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 blah. But the CPI also perceives reality through a very rosy looking glass. Going to the next paragraph, my colleagues and I have modeled an alternative indicator, one that excludes blah, 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 blah. Here again, the results reveal how the challenges facing those with more modest incomes are obscured. They revealed that since 2001, the cost of living for Americans with modest incomes has risen 35% faster than CPI. Put another way, the resources required simply to maintain the same working class lifestyle over the last 2 decades have risen much more drastically than we've been led to believe. Like, I'm not shitting you guys. I've even felt this in the past 5 years of my life, where it's sort of like, even when I've gotten the occasional cost of living raise, which, was like 2.5% or something like that, it's almost like, because I've, made the same amount for a few years and I feel like more broke every year. Which feels bad, and why does all this matter, right? Well, it matters in one sense because it sucks to be told that, that things are fine when they're not. It sucks to be gaslit by journalists and loud boys on Twitter and politicians. But more importantly than that, I think it gives us some insight into the election, right? Like, I think, one of the mechanisms by which we've been led to understand the 2024 election is like Joe Rogan and a bunch of digital transphobes or whatever made the election happen the way that happened. Yeah, Jay Burnett said, I'm just going to look at this, said, I make $75K in LA and barely break even. Yeah, that's the thing, right? I think, like, let's say you live in LA or New York or whatever, and you tell your friends, oh, I make $75,000 a year. They might be like, damn, the homies back in Omaha are like, you're killing it, Jay Burnett. But it's like nothing. It's like nothing. Like, I will say that I'm not going to say what I make. That's gauche. But, it's just an expensive place to live. Like the amount my wife and I pay for, like, I'll just say this. I pay an insane amount in rent. If I told you guys how much I pay in rent, you would think I was insane. And when people from other parts of the country, like people in LA see my wife and I's, rental, and they're like, oh, this place is nice. people from other parts of the country are like, what? Like I talked to a cousin in Minnesota. And I told my cousin in Minnesota how much we pay for rent for like a 2-bedroom kind of townhousey type thing. And it's like twice as much as what her and her husband pay for like a 4-bedroom house outside of Minneapolis for their mortgage. You know, just saying places be expensive. But the issue with this, of course, is that, and I think for liberals especially, right? What do we hear from a lot of Democrat people and influencers? Trump won because everyone's racist. People are racist. That's real. Trump won because everyone hates migrants. Some people do. That's very real. Trump won because people love Elon. Some people do. You guys are weird. Increasingly weird, too. But, you know, one of the reasons he won is because a lot of people felt like shit sucked. And one candidate or party was like, yeah, shit sucks. Now, they blamed the wrong people. They used the suckiness of shit to push a at least soft fascist or authoritarian agenda. However, Jared, everyone is flocking to Minnesota, and I'm not even kidding. People in LA, like we talk about Minnesota, we talk about Wisconsin, we talk about Michigan. Shout to the Great Lakes. But another party in the election was like, vote for us because we already did it. Inflation is down, things are good. And that really alienates people. You know, it's sort of like, okay, imagine this. Have you ever had the thing where some shit sucks in your life? You went through a bad breakup, you lost a job, maybe you're just depressed. And you reach out to a friend, a family member, even a mental health professional. And what they tell you is that, oh, actually, it's not so bad. Actually, you know, it's really okay. Actually, you shouldn't be depressed because things are fine. Does that make you feel good? Does it? Like if you told me like, hey, Michael, I'm feeling kind of bad right now. I just lost my job and kind of feeling whatever. And I was just like, no, you're good actually. And you were like, well, I feel pretty bad. No, you're good. Think on the bright side, bootstraps, positivity, go jogging, whatever. You would be mad and want to stab me with a knife in the eyeballs, right? And I think that that's kind of what people feel like when their basic economic conditions are deteriorating and the people who they look to improve those conditions say, no, you're good actually. You know, hey, my house is on fire. No, it's not. Firemen just standing there eating a fish sandwich from McDonald's, ignoring it as your roof burns. You know, that feels bad. Well, yeah, I mean, in the chat, LAB says 4th generation New Yorker pushed out of the city despite being married to a union plumber. I miss home and I'm trying to adjust, makes me sad my kids won't grow up in Brooklyn. Yeah, like it's just sad. You know? It's sad that people can't live where they grew up. It's sad that, especially like, if you're a union plumber, you should be able to live where you work. If you're a teacher, you should be able to live where you work, you know? And when people aren't able to do that, I know I'm on a soapbox here a little bit. I apologize.
Getting a little woke crack there, Michael.
Oh, fuck. Did I get woke crack? Shit. I'll try to be
you
dark
want
woke
teachers crack. To have like comfortable means of accessing their place of work without and a chance to be in a community where they actually know the kids.
Fuck, that was, yeah, you're right, guys. That was really woke cracky of me. But you know, and then this is we won't get into this whole thing. But where is this? You know, there was I'll post this in the link. I know that Henry had this pulled up as well. There's an Axios article, Axios, Axiosi, and the Axios article is called "Inside Democrats Growing Tension with Their Grassroots." And you know, the TLDR here. I mean, Axios basically, is it sad or nice that Axios does bullet point articles? You know, is it good that they give us information quickly, or is it indicative of the decline of our mental capacity that we can only understand things that are put in bullet points? But basically, like, you know, people in the Democratic Party are really mad. What are they mad at? They're mad that progressive groups are putting pressure on them to do something. They are mad that people are putting pressure on them to maybe fight back against things happening in administration. They should fight back against the fact that Elon Musk is you know, like taking over government offices just because they're, so I think that, yeah, I don't know, man. I think it sucks. I don't know. I feel like I should say something more positive right now. Um, I think McDonald's McRib is a great value and everyone should eat it. Um, let's see. But yeah, you guys can check that out later if you want. Just something worth bringing up. For next week, just a few things I want to note. Housekeeping issues here, guys. Monday is what holiday is Monday again? Is it President's Day? President's
Monday?
Day? Yeah, I think it's President's Day. I'm not going to look it up, but Monday we will not be streaming because there's a federal holiday, and then I am actually taking a few days off. My wife is taking me on a short trip for my 40th birthday. It was a few months ago, but we had some time now. Um, so, and Henry, we can chat about this, but I'm not going to be here on Wednesday. So if Henry's available, maybe we can do a makeup stream Thursday or Friday next week.
Yeah, that sounds doable.
Yeah, so we'll figure it out. We'll let you guys know what we're going to do then, and we'll let you know what we're going to talk about. As always, please do email us at wisecracklive666@gmail.com. There was a really good email, and I don't know if the person said this in the email, and I'll wait, and I'm not going to look into it right now on the stream, but I'd asked about people who got sort of de-radicalized, or who sort of existed on the far right. Let me see if you said in the email, if I could say this on the stream. Well, we'll get into it later. Maybe I'll summarize it, but I really appreciated someone reaching out to talk about their own journey of sort of de-radicalization. I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of people, get radicalized by bad ideas or dangerous ideas for reasons that relate to some of the stuff we talked about with Jared earlier, loneliness and social isolation and all that sort of stuff, and that they can get out of it. So always interested in hearing stories about that. If anyone else has like ideas for, this is hypothetical, but if anyone else had an idea for what one could do to potentially salvage the business side of you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. If anyone has ideas, because as we know, things are a little bit rough in Wisecrack City right now. So always interested in hearing if people have ideas. People have sent some things that are interesting. But yeah, we'll call it here. Please do subscribe to Jared's channel if you haven't yet. Jared is back on Wisecrack. A smart man with reddish good hair was back. Finally, Jared is back. No more Michael. The era of Jared is back. Tell everyone you know. And in the meantime, we will see you guys at some point next week.
Yeah.
And do check out Friday's video. And then also, just so everyone knows, there's no Show Me the Meaning last week. Austin had to take
Maybe
one
next
off.
week, we'll see.
So yeah, so hopefully Show Me the Meaning will come back next week, and we'll get some more of those in while we can.
We'll be talking After Sun for anyone curious to see my face, maybe.
Yeah, great and depressing movie.
See y'all then.